Mike made friends the way bakers make bread, daily, easily, warmly. He permitted no stranger to remain one for long, and when a family moved into his neighborhood, he was usually the first one out to greet them. But in his late teens, he made an acquaintance he should have avoided, a bootlegger who would sell beer to underage minors. Over the next 4 decades, Mike drank away health, relationships, jobs, money, and all but the last 2 years of his life. Now, who can say why resolve sometimes wins out and other times doesn't? But at the age of 54, Mike found enough willpower to empty his beer bottles, stabilize his marriage, reach out to his children, and exchange the liquor store for the local AA. But the hard living had taken its toll. 3 decades of drinking along with 3 packs of smoking had damaged his heart, his big heart, beyond repair. On a January night, he told his wife that he couldn't breathe well. He had already had a doctor's appointment scheduled for a related concern, so decided to try to sleep through it. But by 4 a.m., he had chest pain so severe that he had to make a call to the hospital. And as the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, they told his wife and son to meet him at the hospital. From the stretcher, Mike waved weakly and smiled bravely, telling them not to worry. But by the time his family reached the hospital, he was gone. Somehow, while racing down a Texas highway in the ambulance through a dark, moonless night, struggling to catch each breath, Mike had realized he only had a few left. Rather than panic, he had drawn on his remaining strength, and his hand was now resting on the top of his thigh, with 2 center fingers folded in, thumb extended in a universal sign for I love you, the last message to his family. An ambulance isn't the only ride that demands valor. You may not be down on your last breath, but you may be down on your last paycheck, solution, or thimble of faith. Each sunrise seems to bring fresh reasons and for fear and anxiety. We have a plaque on our bathroom wall next to the mirror that reads, "Good morning, let the stress begin." They may be talking layoffs at your work. There may be slowdowns in the economy, flare-ups in the Middle East, turn-downs in the stock market, upswings in the global warming, a new strain of COVID in your county. News programs having enough hand-wringing information to warrant an advisory. Caution, this news report is best viewed in the confines of an underground bunker. We fear finishing last, going broke, growing old, the mole on our back. We depend on mood-altering drugs more than any other generation in history. A recent survey showed that children today are more fearful than psychiatric patients were in the 1950s. Fear is unwilling to share the heart with happiness. Happiness complies and leaves. Can anyone be happy and afraid, confident and afraid, merciful and afraid? Fear never wrote a symphony nor a poem, never saved a business or a marriage. Courage did that. Faith did that, but never fear. For fear herds us into a prison and slams the doors. Wouldn't it be great to walk out? What if faith, not fear, was our default reaction to threats? Can you imagine a life with no fear, no anxiety? This is the possibility behind Jesus' question, "Why are you afraid?" Matthew 8:26. Is Jesus serious or teasing? kind of like one swimmer asking another, "Are you wet?" Jesus is very serious. So are the men to whom he asks the question. A storm has turned their Galilean dinner cruise into a white-knuckled plunge. Here is how one of them remembers the trip. Jesus got into the boat, and his followers got in with him. A great storm arose on the lake so that waves covered the boat. These are Matthew's words. And he was careful in his terminology. Not just any noun would do. He pulled his Greek thesaurus off the shelf and hunted for a description that exploded like the waves across the bow. He bypasses terms for a spring shower, squall, downpour, or cloudburst. He called more than winds and whitecaps. He found a word that worked, seismos, a trembling eruption of sea and sky. A great seismos arose on the lake, Matthew 8:23. My New King James Version says tempest. The word seismos was used on only two other occasions. Once at Jesus' death when Calvary shook, Matthew 27:51, and again at Jesus' resurrection when the graveyard trembled, Matthew 28:2. Evidently, the stilled storm shares equal billing in the trilogy of Jesus' great shakeups, defeating sin on the cross, defeating death at the tomb, and here, silencing fear on the sea. The story sends the not so subtle reminder, getting on board with Jesus can mean getting soaked with Jesus. Disciples can expect rough seas and stout winds. John 16:33 says, "In the world you will, not might or may or could, you will have tribulation." Christ's followers face fears. It's not the absence of storms that sets us apart. It's whom we discover in the storm, an unconcerned Christ. Matthew 8:24 says, Jesus was sleeping. Now this troubled his disciples. Matthew and Mark record their responses in 3 staccato Greek pronouncements and 1 question. The pronouncements, Lord, save dying. Matthew 8:25, Lord, save us, we are dying. The question, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Mark 4:38. They don't ask about Jesus' strength. Can you still the storm? His knowledge. Are you aware of the storm? Or his ability? Do you have any experience with storms? Rather, they raise doubts about his character. Do you not care? Fear does this. Fear corrodes our confidence in God's goodness. If God can sleep in our storms, if his eyes shut when ours grow wide, does he care? Fear unleashes a storm of doubts. Fear deadens our recall. The disciples had plenty of reasons to trust Jesus. By now they had seen him, Matthew 24:23 says, healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease among the people. Healing a leper with a touch and a servant with a command in Matthew 8:3-13. And they saw demons scatter like bats out of a cave. Matthew 18:16 says he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. Fear creates a form of spiritual amnesia. It dulls our miracle memory. It makes us forget what Jesus has done and how good God is. One of my favorite E.G. White quotes is, "We need not fear for the future unless we forget the way God has led us in the past." Unless we forget spiritual amnesia. When fear shapes our lives, safety becomes our God. We worship a risk-free life. No wonder Jesus wages such a war against fear. His most common command emerges from the fear not genre. The Gospels list some 125 Christ-issued imperatives, and of these, 21 urge us not to be afraid in some form. The second most common command to love God and neighbor appears only 8 times. Jesus takes fear seriously. He was always calling us to courage. To name a few, don't be afraid, just believe. Luke 8:50. Take courage, I am here. Matthew 14:27. Do not fear, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Luke 12:32. Don't be troubled or afraid. John 14. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. That's John 14:1. Jesus does not want us to live in a state of fear, nor do you. You've never made statements like, my phobias put such a spring in my step, or I would be a rotten parent if it wasn't for my hypochondria, or how about thank goodness for my pessimism. I've been such a better person since I lost hope. Let's embolden ourselves with the Jesus do not fear statements. The promise of Christ is simple. We can fear less tomorrow than we do today. Let me take a moment to tell you about the villagers of Stiltsville. Perhaps you don't know then, maybe you do, about Stiltsville, the village. So strange, but so true. Where people like we, some tiny, some small, with jobs and kids and clocks on the wall, keep an eye on the time for each evening at 6. They meet in the square for the purpose of sticks, tall stilts upon which Stiltsvillians can strut and be lifted above those down in the rut. The less than the least, the tribe of 2 smalls, the not cools and have-nots who want to be tall, but can't, because in the giving of sticks, their name was not called. They didn't get picked. Yet still they come when the villagers gather. They press to the front and they see if they matter. To the click of the cool, the chord of the clout that decides who is special and declares with a shout, you are classy, you are pretty, you clever or funny, and bequeath the prize, not medals or money, not a freshly baked pie or a house someone built, but the oddest of gifts, the gift of some stilts. Moving up is their mission, going higher their aim. Elevate your position is the name of their game. The higher-ups of Stiltsville, you know if you've been there, make the biggest to-do of the sweetness of thin air. They relish the chance on their high apparatus to strut on their stilts the ultimate status. For isn't life best when viewed from the top? Unless you stumble and suddenly are not so sure of your footing, you tilt and you sway. Look out below, and you fall straight away into the 2 smalls, hoity-toity of the earth. You land on your pride, and oh boy, how it hurts. When the chick police in the jilts don't offer to help, but instead take your stilts. Who made you king? You start to complain, but then notice the hour and forget your refrain. It's almost 6. No time for chatter. It's back to the crowd to see if you matter. And that just might be the question. Do we matter? We fear we don't. We fear nothingness, insignificance. We fear coming and going and no one knowing. That's why it bothers us when a friend forgets to call or a colleague states credit for our work, because it means we aren't worth caring about. And for that reason, we crave the attention of our spouse or the affirmation of our boss or drop names of important people in our conversation. Fashion designers tell us, you'll be somebody if you wear our jeans. Stick our name on your rear end and insignificance will vanish. We covet some stilts. Then, horror of horrors, the styles change, and we're left wearing yesterday's jeans, and welcome back to the tribe of 2 smalls. So we hook our wagon to a rising star. Why? Because it separates us from the plebeians, it momentarily elevates us onto their stilts. That philosophy motivated Thomas to keep Dean Martin's cigarette butt in a jar next to his bed. When Dean Martin graced Thomas's town by appearing in a celebrity golf tournament, Thomas and his father were in the gallery. When the icon flicked his cigarette to the side, Thomas was there to snag it. And who could forget the moment when Thomas's friends gathered in his bedroom to behold the holy stogie? They all cashed in on the trickle-down principle of celebrity economics. Dean Martin was a star. Thomas owned Dean Martin's cigarette. The friends knew Thomas. They were all down-the-line beneficiaries of Dean Martin's stardom. Connect to someone special and become someone special. Or simply outlive life. When a billionaire realizes he'll run out of years before he runs out of money, he often starts a foundation and his name lives on. Italian jeans, Dean Martin's cigarette butt, foundations, legacies. Forever trying to prove Bertrand Russell wrong. Bertrand was a fatalistic atheist who concluded, and I quote, "I believe that when I die, my bones will rot and nothing shall remain of my ego." He can't be right, we sigh. He isn't right, Jesus announces. And in some of the kindest words, Jesus allays the fear of Stiltsvillians. Matthew 10:29 and 31. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. And even the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. I'm steadily making it easier for God to count the number of hairs on my head. But then who's counting? We style hair, color hair, cut hair, but we don't count hair. But God does. The same with sparrows. In chapter 12, verse 6 of Luke's gospel, Jesus says, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for more than 2 pennies? And not one of them is forgotten before God. 2 sparrows for a penny in Matthew, 5 for 2 pennies in Luke. So the 5th sparrow is thrown in free." Society still has its share of 5th sparrows. Indistinct souls who feel dispensable, disposable, worth less than a penny. They drive in carpools and work in cubicles. Some sleep beneath cardboard beside sidewalks. Others beneath comforters in the suburbs. What they share is a feeling of smallness. There's flocks of sparrows in Chinese orphanages. China's one-child policy has a way of weeding out the less fortunate. Males are selected over females. Healthy babies outrank the impaired. Every message tells them, you don't matter. So when someone tells them otherwise, they melt. John Bentley, a missionary to China, describes such a moment. Orphans in Henan province were given a Mandarin translation of a children's book entitled You Are Special by Max Lucado. The story describes Punchinello, a wooden person in a village of wooden people. The story says that the villagers had a practice of sticking stars on achievers and dots on the strugglers. Punchinello had so many dots that people gave him dots for no reason. But then he met Eli, his maker. Eli affirmed him, telling him to disregard the opinion of others. I made you, he explained. I don't make mistakes. Punchinello had never heard such words. When he did, his dots began to fall off. And when the children in the orphanage heard such words, their worlds began to change. John Bentley describes the moment. I quote, "As the story was being read to the children, at a certain point, they all began crying. I couldn't understand what was happening. Americans are somewhat used to the idea of positive reinforcement, not so in China, particularly not for those who are virtually abandoned and considered valueless by natural parents because they were born broken. When the idea came through to them that they were special simply because they were made by a loving Creator, everyone started crying, including their teachers. It was incredible." Do you need this reminder? Any chance that these words are falling on the ears of a fifth sparrow? If so, it's time to deal with the fear of not mattering. Otherwise, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy that will ruin your life. It works like this. You're struggling your way through a menial job that pays poorly and saps your energy. The salary covers your bills, but nothing more. But then you read of a job opening that capitalizes on your skills. So in a moment of uncharacteristic courage, you submit your application. Then it comes time for the interview, and that's when the mentality of a tribe of two smalls takes over. "I'll never impress them," you moan. "I'll look stupid in the interview," you think. "I'll never get this job." A mouse facing a hungry cat has a better chance of success. So you flop miserably and descend yet another level into the basement of self-doubt. The fear of insignificance creates the results it dreads, arrives at the destination it tries to avoid, and facilitates the scenario it disdains. For example, picture a basketball player standing at the foul line with the final opportunity to win the game. In her mind, she is repeating, "I'll never make this shot. I'll never make this shot." Will she make the shot? Probably not. Spending time thinking you will never make a difference, repeating "I'm not worth anything," will sentence you to a life of gloom. And even more, you are disagreeing with God. According to Him, you were skillfully wrought, Psalms 139:15. You were fearfully and wonderfully made, Psalms 139:14. He can't stop thinking about you. If you could count His thoughts of you, Psalms 139:18 says, they would be more in number than the sand. Why does He love you so much? Perhaps for the same reason the artist loves his painting, or the boat builder loves his vessels. You are His idea, and God only has good ideas. God is enough, isn't He? No more stilts or struts, spills or falls. Let others play those silly games, not us. We've found something better. We have Jesus. And so I understand have some of the people in Stiltsville. Stiltsvillians still cluster, and the crowds still clamor. But more stay away, they seem less enamored, since the carpenter came and refused to be stilted. He chose low over high and left the system tip-tilted. You matter already, He explained to the town. Trust me on this one. Keep your feet on the ground. Let's pray. May the Lord keep you in His care. May He cradle you in His arms. May He shield you from Satan's snare and protect you from all harm. Amen. Have a blessed Sabbath.